Hey everyone. So I'm actually going to be working on a sort of a follow-up video to the previous one I made about Doom, thanks to a lot of feedback and stuff. Um, Basically, there was a couple of hidden mechanics discovered in the dungeon that ultimately make it a lot easier. And now that people actually know how to do the dungeon for the most part, running it with a actually coordinated party makes it very doable. Still doing difficulty 2 and 3. I did run some 4s with the carry, but and the other thing that we learned is that soloing in this game actually greatly reduces the difficulty of the dungeon, but it also slightly affects drop rates as well. So, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to talk about in this video, I wanted to talk about builds for Blade Master, what I'm currently using and everything like that. And I'll make, like I said, I'll be making an update video, a follow-up video to the Doom one later. So I'm going to go through my builds that I use for Blade Master, for DPS, for PvP, and for tanking. So 3 different scenarios there. The DPS build I usually use if I'm off tanking or if I'm doing dailies. The PvP build is for PvP, obviously, and then the tanking build is when I'm main tank. Alright, so let's look at the talents real quick. So we'll start off with tanking, which I think is the most simplest one to understand. So here is the talents for tanking. Obviously, you want to use Excited because it's literally your tanking talent. If you're not using Excited, you're doing it wrong. For B and A, for B and A, I like to have New Life and Cherry Blossom Snow. And the reason for this is because it keeps my Sakura Slay on a faster cooldown, which gives me a slightly faster rotation. And it also increases the damage of Infernal Beauty. At least I think that's what that does. I don't use the Void one because dodging in PvE, at least right now, since we don't have any ways to improve dodging, is very unreliable. In PvP, it's a different story. In PvP, you can dodge everything. But in PvE, especially against bosses, relying on dodging doesn't always work out the best. And super armor, the super armor that you get from Void and the damage reduction doesn't really help a whole lot. And just in my personal opinion. Now, if you are completely still dying a lot, you might want to switch to this. And then for your A talent, I would still keep that one or even use Rakasha Dance if you want. But yeah, this is what I personally like to go with, just for some added DPS. It just gives me a couple, a faster cooldown time and everything like that when I'm at Katana. And then finally, obviously, the big one here is Dragon Lord's Wrath. This one is your other secondary tanking skill. Less HP equals more damage reduction, more dodge rate, more move speed. Yeah, it's pretty much what you want to use in those types of situations. It just gives you better damage reduction. You can also use Izanami's Dance if you want, but again, the problem with that is that you're losing the damage reduction and also you're relying on dodging. So, and plus with the damage loss you get from Excited, it's not really anything major there. So for the skills for tanking, so for the Katana form switch, you're going to be using Redoubtable, which increases your defenses for you and your allies. Makes sense. Obviously, you're going to be using Moongazer and Wayne. There is no reason to use Flash because enemies bosses don't get hit from delay, and you also can't chuck them, so there's no point in that. For your counterattack, you're going to probably want to use this one. This one deals less damage on the counterattack, but it deflects more damage, 40% as opposed to 30%. I'm sorry, reduces damage by 40% over 30%. And it also inflicts delay and reduces their attack by 12%. So it's another damage reduction tactic, so you want to use that. And then finally, for your Odachi element, I use Fire. For pretty much any PvE scenario, you're going to want to use Fire. The reason is because it inflicts burn ticks, which does damage over time. This is why you build mostly fire damage on Blade Master, is to buff up your fire Odachi attack. This is the only attack that actually deals fire damage, is anytime it procs. So the skills that can proc fire damage are the switch attack, the roundhouse move, the gap closer, the diagonal slash, which is the second attack of Azure Moon, and I think and the charge normal attack, right? And the charge normal attack. So all of those moves can inflict elemental damage, and Blade Master has access to fire, ice, and lightning. So that's what I use for tanking. That's my tanking build. And then for EX skills, obviously Diamond Realm, because it gets it gets buffed with Excited so that you absorb damage and also increases damage reduction. It is a super powerful EX. And then for your other EX, now ultimately I would say Dustbuster when you unlock it, but obviously we're not going to get it for quite a little while yet because we need to get EX8 and we're only getting EX7 after level 6, after 76. So it's going to be a little bit while before we get that. But for now, I use Royal Fire, and that's just because it just gives you damage over time. And it also has a very short cooldown. So I really do like Royal Fire for PvE. Another one that might work is Thunderclap is also pretty good as well. For that same type of thing. Tyrant's Eye I don't really like, and because one, it has a very long cooldown. It has 120 seconds at level 1, and 2, it also just kind of leaves you standing there. And it also, I find, doesn't really, even though it says it does a lot of damage, I feel like it doesn't really. It's more used for PvP, and we'll get to that. Alright, so I guess coming off of this, we'll go over to DPSs. So for DPS, Heavy Strike, obviously. I wouldn't recommend Blossom Slash. Now, I've tried using this type of build here, where you just focus entirely on the katana, but the problem with this is that you'll find out very quickly the katana's damage isn't really anything special. Even if you have very high amount of armor pen, it doesn't really do a whole lot, and doesn't really help you that much. So I'm not really a huge fan of it, and I've always found this setup with Heavy Strike to be more reliable. So I always use Heavy Strike, because this just gives you a raw 20% damage increase on every single Odachi skill. For your B talent, for DPS, I would say Sakura Slay. I don't really see anything else, or the New Life one, right, sorry. I don't really see anything else to fit in that slot. For the A talent, you have a couple of options. If you want to keep the sort of the same rotation you did from tanking, then Cherry Blossom Snow. If you're doing dailies with lots of enemies that can be inflicted with Aerial, Moonshackle is incredibly good. And then if you just want to do slightly more damage with Odachi, then Rakshasa, wow, what the hell is that? Rakasha, I'm just going to call it Rakasha Dance. But again, the super armor doesn't really do much, but so I actually like this build. I usually go with this. And then obviously Izanami's Dance as your final, because it gives you more damage and also more dodge in your other form for 10 seconds. We'll talk about that. It's going to go to PvP. So for DPS, for skills, I actually use this one because it does more damage on the counterattack if you need to use it. But using this one is also fine because it does give damage reduction, so either one is perfectly fine. Obviously, Fighting Spirit, which gives you and your allies more damage. Obviously, Moongazer, and obviously, again, Fire. So that's pretty self-explanatory there. Now, your EXs you can do either Diamond Realm or Oberon. I still recommend Diamond Realm just because it gives you a better damage reduction as opposed to Oberon, which gives you less damage reduction, but also gives them crit resistance at higher tiers and also immunity to control effects. So that's more of a PvP-oriented one. And again, for your EX skill, I would say Scorch or Royal Fire or even Tyrant's Eye if you're worried about taking damage from raid wides and stuff. And Thunderclap, they're all good. Whichever one you like the most, pretty much. All right, and then finally, PvP. So for PvP, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. So this is the PvP talent build that I use. So for C rank talent, once again, Heavy Strike, not anything really huge there. Wind and Moon for Void in PvP. This is so good. This is, in my opinion, the must-have PvP talent because Void in PvP, especially right now, since we don't have any ways to increase dodge or hit rate is so strong. It is Void is probably one of the strongest abilities in PvP right now because it completely shuts down any form of CC and also just completely negates damage if you dodge it. So every time you dodge, it increases it up to 10 seconds. It's incredible. It's such a good ability. Highly recommend it. Same thing for the A rank talent, Rakasha Dance. Again, this is so good because it gives you slightly increased damage as well as super armor. When you're in Odachi form, this just gives you even more CC immunity and knockdown immunity when your Void is on cooldown. So it is a very, very strong talent. And then lastly, obviously, Izanami's Dance. Now, you can go with Naraku. You can go with this talent. The problem is this talent is so situational. The odds of you dying with Naraku, let alone even being able to hit someone after you died with Naraku, is really low. I haven't told you, I've tried using this talent and I've had someone kill me with it. So I'm like, oh, I'm about to wreck this guy's shit. And then you find out that you can't catch him because of lag and because you don't have any really good gap closers. Even when you try to dodge them, they can just pop their CC immunity. Or I'm sorry, stun them. They can just pop their CC immunity. With people with the Drac that gives you extended super armor off of a dodge, it's really hard to do. That's why I always go Izanami's Dance. And if you do die with Naraka, you have a chance to, kill them or get revenge or do whatever you need to do. But you're not focusing your entire build on running in and dying. This also just gives you more dodges, which again, when combined with Void, it does so many good things for you. So this is my PvP build. This is what I recommend for PvP. Now for EXs, Oberon. I mean, Oberon is definitely the best for PvP because it gives you control immunity for allies as well as some increased defense. It also, like I said, later on it'll give you crit resistance. I guess you need to get level 8, right? Yeah, so at tier 4, which you need level 8 for, it gives you crit resistance to allies as well. So definitely Oberon for that. Now, for the damage EX, it depends. For 1v1, Winter. 100% Winter. Ice in 1v1 scenarios is so good right now. And I'll show you that when I go into the skills. It is very, very, very good. So this ability, which slows them down, and then afterwards it also freezes them, is so useful for Blade Master, who has to... they have gap closures, but they still struggle with getting in on people. So using this just makes that a lot easier. Now, again, Dustbuster is a really good one. The only problem with Dustbuster is not unlocked till level 8, but this is also a very strong one as well. As well as Vortex. Vortex is another very strong one, which you're actually going to unlock at level 7. I forgot to mention this one in the tanking build as well. This is another very strong one for Blade Masters. The other one I'd recommend for PvP is Tyrant's Eye. I would only recommend this, though, for large-scale fights. It is pretty pointless in 1v1s when the enemy can just keep damaging you and just not be in range of it. Otherwise, for 1v1s, I would say, Winter. Another one good for Battlefield, again, is Royal Fire, because it's just damage over time in a large area, so that's also really good. Thunderclap is also good as well for that reason. So, but again, if you're doing 1v1, I always go with Winter, because it's just one of the best abilities. Now for skills, so you have a couple options here for switching to Katana. Now I usually like to do Fighting Spirit because it just gives you more damage for 5 seconds. So what I would suggest is that if you're doing a large scale PvP, obviously you want Fighting Spirit. 1v1 though, you can use Aftershock because it inflicts aerial. So this one can also be kind of good as well in 1v1 scenarios, but I always just like to deal more damage, so I usually go with the Fighting Spirit one. But if you want to have a little bit more CC and inflict aerial, this one's also very good. For PvP, you always want to use Flash. Now, the important thing to know with Flash is that this move, Counter Wave, which is basically your fling, don't use it right away in 1v1s, because what happens is it flings enemies pretty far. And continuing a combo after that can be pretty difficult if you're not paying attention to it. By the time you reach them and actually inflict damage, they already have their, their get up attack ready, and they have their super armor on, and you're not going to be able to do much. In large scale battles, you just want to fling the healer or the assassin or whoever's the biggest target into your enemies, into your team. In 1v1, I usually just use flash as a stun and a gap closer, and then I do my quick burst with Blossom Dance and Sakura Slay, and then I fling them backwards, and then switch to Odachi, and then try to freeze them if I can. Which brings me to the next one. Odachi, you want to use Blizzard. For PvP, you always want to use Blizzard. Like I said, freeze in PvP is so strong. Now, for large-scale PvP, you could argue having Shock. You could argue having Lightning, because it does help constantly, delay, stun enemies and makes them unable to react. It paralyzes them, right? But I still think freeze is just better in most situations. You have to mash out of it. You can't move at all. When you're shocked, you can still technically move. It's just really good. Again, you want to make sure you charge it when the enemy's knocked down for the highest chance of freeze. And then if you do want to go fire, you can go with fire. Because it does deal more damage over time. But in my opinion, I just think better CC just works out better. And I think Blizzard, at least for 1v1 Arena, is what you want to go with. And then finally, obviously, you want to go with this counterattack, which knocks enemies into the air and inflicts aerial. It also lets you gap close to them very, very easily, as opposed to this one, which just stuns them and reduces their attack. It could still be good, but I like inflicting aerial on them better because I think it just tracks better and just lets me lead up to more combos if I need to. All right, so that's it for my builds for... I guess I'll talk about cores too real quick. So for Blade Master cores, just really quick, you want to prioritize fire, and then second priority should be put on water, and then your third priority put on wind or earth. The reason why you don't want to stack all earth is because you get so much constitution innately that it's almost pointless to do this because you suffer a lot of damage. Your primary element should be these fire gems for strength. They give you the biggest bang for your buck. The second one, a lot of people say you want to use water, and this is because this gives you cooldown reduction, which for a tank and for a Blade Master who has to be close range is very, very good. It's a very good thing to have. It also gives you, I think, more armor pen as well, so I would highly recommend getting that for insight. And then I have one con gem on here. I have it level 10 just because it's the only con gem I have. I just have it on here just to get some extra constitution, and then my other two slots are actually dexterity, which gives you more multi-strike as well as more crit damage. So it's the only time I'll really level dexterity is when I'm using these wind gems. So that's what I recommend for core. So prioritize fire gems. After that, fill all your blue gems, and then fill the rest with either one or two con gems, and then the other two wind gems. That's my personal recommendation. The other thing too with con also is that if you don't want to have a con gem in there, you can just get a con draconic and then replace that with another wind. So to make up that loss. So it's not a huge deal, but you also might miss the other thing with draconic. So anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like I said, I'll hopefully be making another video soon. I hope this one helps those who wanted a guide on Blade Master. And so, yeah.